Welcome to our special coverage marking the first 100 days of President Joe Biden's administration. I'm Mika Brzezinski, along with Joe Scarborough and Willie Geist. The 2020 election was often called the most consequential in recent memory, and the past 3 months have shown why. The Biden White House inherited a country reeling from the pandemic and the challenge of getting millions of vaccines to every corner of America. There was the economic fallout from that virus and the no-holds-barred fight on Capitol Hill to fund the nation's badly needed recovery. There was the crisis at the border, with more and more migrants seeking refuge in the United States. And that's just here at home. Overseas, China and Russia continue to test the American experiment for weak spots, raising the stakes on the world stage. We've got all of this covered this morning, but first, what makes the 100-day benchmark so significant? To tackle that question, let's bring in an author and NBC News presidential historian, Michael Beschloss.
Michael, thanks so much. Of course, as Joe Biden was going into office, there are always people trying to draw parallels. A lot of people were talking about FDR. I was talking about Harry Truman and how he could match up to Harry Truman. But actually, when you talk about the first 100 days, doesn't that go back to FDR?
It does. And it really was almost public relations, because at the beginning of Roosevelt's presidency, as you well know, all three of you do, 1933, the banks were closed. We were in a terrible depression. The country seemed to be coming to its knees. And FDR did things like reopening the banks, establishing institutions, restoring confidence that made people feel better within the first 90 or 100 days. So Roosevelt's aides said, well, why don't we sort of say the first 100 days is a really important benchmark for every president, and look at how Roosevelt has passed the test, which he sure did. Probably every president since then has rued the day that Roosevelt did that, because, as the three of you all know, oftentimes a president does not show his stuff during that first period.
Michael, of course, the New Deal was unique historically in its scope, but President Biden has drawn comparisons, as Joe said, to FDR in his ambitions, his legislative ambitions. If you look at the sheer numbers that we're talking about, up into the trillions on a couple of different packages. How do you compare in that way, legislatively, what Joe Biden has done so far, what he hopes to do in the next few weeks, compared to FDR?
Well, this is what they call a transforming president, meaning a president who's not just trying to fix problems he's dealing with, but also change the system so that those problems are less likely to happen again. And that's why we honor FDR. He said, we're going to have the government more involved in helping people directly from Washington than has ever been the case before, because in a modern economy, there are too many dangers. And LBJ in 1965 said federal government has to move in to make sure there are civil rights and voting rights, and people are helped in education, and people who are poor get direct help, and all sorts of other things like Medicare. All these things change the face of the American political system in a way that affects us to this day. So let's just look at what Biden has done over the last 100 days. He's used the force of the presidency to fight the pandemic in a way that sure didn't happen under Donald Trump. No talk about injecting bleach or disinfectant or ultraviolet rays. You really see the federal government moving in. And if Biden had not fought the pandemic effectively, we certainly would be hearing about it. The economy is better in all sorts of ways, and also the threats of democracy, which we saw on the 6th of January at the time of that insurrection. I guarantee you that if Joe Biden had not done well during these first 100 days, you would see people saying we have to take power into our own hands against the federal government, against the president.
We certainly have seen a return to constitutional norms, to basic political norms that often were skirted over the past 4 years during the Trump presidency. And you are right. I think we also saw a real difference in how COVID was tackled. There was a lot of disinformation coming out of Donald Trump's press conferences, even if you compare them to what he said privately to journalist Bob Woodward. Is that perhaps the biggest difference?
It is the biggest difference because, that's, the most basic job a president has, as you well know, Joe, is to help Americans protect themselves when their lives are at stake, whether it's at war or a time of economic crisis or a time of pandemic. And Donald Trump was shamefully negligent. He never did that. One might say that over 500,000 Americans, many of those people died needlessly, would not have died had you had a more competent president. Now we've got one.
Michael, I want to show a picture that you actually tweeted earlier this week. I've already put it at the top of my Twitter of my Twitter page because I think it defines not only sort of the can-do American character of 1945, but also I still see a lot of this in American entrepreneurs, in American healthcare workers, in Americans across this country, people who believe anything is still possible.
Absolutely. Hitler had been dominating Europe and other places, and Franklin Roosevelt, a great president who certainly had flaws, but a great president, said, we Americans can help to build a mighty war effort that can topple Adolf Hitler, and did so in about 3 years. And this time in 1945, the Allies, with not only we, but our allied partners, were basically rushing on Berlin to conquer Berlin. Hitler was in the bunker, and you had this wonderful picture of this guy who was a paratrooper, as you know, Joe, who's there enjoying Hitler's cognac in his Alpine retreat. What better symbol of the fact that not only did America and its partners win the war in Europe, but we did it with citizen soldiers. He was not a professional.
Michael Beschloss, thank you so much.
Hey, thanks so much for watching our YouTube channel. You can follow up on today's top stories and breaking news, or catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.